Hi, welcome to this channel on magnetic energy, technology, principles, applications. This video is about magnetic energy and elemental vibrations and sound. And I had to actually dust off my guitar for this, only because there's some parallels and some information about this topic that relate to music and especially acoustic music. So real quick, the metaphysical message of this video is please take the time sometimes to expose yourself to pure acoustic instruments, whether it's a sound healing bowls or whether it's an acoustic guitar, as long as there's no electricity involved, okay? And so I'm a big fan of lots of genres of music, and I love like certain types of music that require some pretty serious amplification and effects. But for this purpose and for just really tapping into universal energies and getting the most out of your experience with that at a deeper, higher level, going pure acoustic has a tremendous amount of advantages. And one of the reasons why that is because electricity really tends to, at least in our experience, in our experiments, electricity really tends to block magnetic energy flow, etheric flow. This is an etheric magnetic energy model of the universe, and so we're going back to all natural, which brings me to ancient civilizations and how they do not get the credit they deserve for all of the technology that they had, the natural technology, their awareness, their attunement with the planet. So I want to talk for a second about some of the accomplishments that they did according, that we're speculating, this is speculation, but it's based on our experimental research and the evidence of what they did. And part of it is they had the ability they were so in touch with sound and frequencies and vibration, and they had the ability to generate notes and musical notes and sound vibrations that were coinciding with the elements and the rocks and the stones that were part of their environment. So like, for example, they may have developed tuning forks and they may have developed other types of technology that when they vibrated that technology, they could feel a resonance, like a magnetic resonance, happening in the stones that they were working with. Now, as soon as they did that, and I'm just kind of making up this story, but it's to get certain principles across. As soon as they felt that resonance or that vibration, and they realized also that with a group of them, they could create sound even with their own voices that would resonate those stones in a certain manner. It wasn't long until they discovered that if they had certain notes like thirds and fifths, and then they went beyond to like do eighths and thirteenths and 21sts, you see where I'm going with that, with the golden ratio? They started really breaking through some very pivotal, extraordinary discoveries with their stones. One of those would be if you have certain sounds and you have sounds that are harmonic with each other, they can hit very high harmonics. And so if you have a stone that's vibrating or resonating at a certain frequency and you intensify that resonation and you start grouping your notes together with thirds and fifths and so on, the different elements in that stone all start vibrating. The intensity of that vibration increases in those stones, and then they notice something. They notice that water, for example, would almost kind of vibrate and to some degree hover over that flat stone surface. It would almost like start to hover, and because of the vibration. And now they realize that there are certain vibrations that water really resonates with, and so they would start capitalizing on that vibration. So now we get into this idea where they have a road, if you will, or a path of flat stones surrounded by stones that are all in this vibrational sequence, and they're producing sound vibrations. And now if they have, for example, like a vibrato shock wave, so like a vibrato would just be like one note or a group of notes that's just vibrating on its own, but it kind of produces this shockwave effect. And all of a sudden, between the vibrato shockwave And the differential in the notes that they're producing, whether it's through tuning forks or with their own voices in a group of people, they notice a movement in the water. They can actually begin to transport the water through vibration and sound, because they have, if you know anything about this type of science, if you reach the intensity that you need, then you actually can move the water. Now, the problem right now with modern science is whenever we're doing these types of experiments, we always use electrical equipment to generate the sounds, which is a massive problem because it requires so much energy to achieve such little phenomena, such little breakthroughs, and so it makes it very impractical. But if you go strictly acoustically, and if you're in tune with the elemental vibrations that you are working with, not only do those sounds amplify off of each other, but they really produce lasting effects. And so once they started going to these higher frequencies, and then they start really tuning into what's going on with the vibrations, and they can move water, then something else extraordinary happened, okay? They realized that if they can have something called a tremolo pulsing, or some people will call it tremolo beats, but it's this idea, if you have two notes, and if you're familiar with this, then you know what I'm talking about. But if you have two notes, I don't know if you can hear that. There's a slight pulsing when you have notes that are not the same. There's a slight pulsing, so this really gets into like microtones. So the further apart those notes get, the faster that pulsing becomes, and that's kind of the whole idea between like hemisync technology and beats. What is it called? Binaural beats. So binaural beat technology. So it's this idea that if you have two different notes that are slightly off, like microtones apart, they will produce a pulse resonance. Now that's very much in line with magnetic principles, and I'll get to that in a second. Now, if you have a complex array of notes and you're capitalizing on tremolo pulsing, all of a sudden you can reach into some pretty high frequencies. And so when they did that, they discovered that, whoa, something's happening. The rocks, the stones, don't weigh as much when they are completely vibrating with this tremolo pulsing. And when we're combining sounds and combining frequencies, and whether they knew it or not, but they're hitting some very high frequencies, and at the same time water is responding to that process. So now you can have vibrato shock waves and tremolo pulsing, and now all of a sudden now your water can move uphill. And that's something extraordinary. And so not only are they tapping into natural etheric energies of the earth, but they're doing it with vibration and sound and capitalizing on that. That's kind of amazing. So I mean, we've got differential pulsing, we've got differential tremolo pulsing, we've got vibrato shock waves. And so now if we take that technology, there's one more thing. What they also discovered, in my opinion, based on our research and with this, and based on what they've achieved, they discovered that if they had certain rocks or elements in a serious vibrational state, and then they went to cut those elements with something attached to a wand, for example, that would have that similar vibrational state, or a tool that was also in that vibrational state, all of a sudden those stones were very, very easy to cut. Not with only with extraordinary precision. So you could have very massive stones that have amazing cuts on them that would be difficult to achieve without some serious engineering today. But they had a different technology, so they were capitalizing on this natural vibratory resonance, this magnetic resonance in these stones, so they could achieve all this really cool stuff. Now, fast forward to now and today, and we take magnetic devices with neutral flowing magnetic current, and it's not that dissimilar from like a guitar strings, in the sense that the thickness of the string, the composition of the string, the length of the string, how that string is tuned, or how that wire is tuned, for example, and then you combine that with neutral magnetic pulsing through that wire. And I'll just break down neutral magnetic pulsing. One simple example of that is how fast you switch the polarities that are being attracted through that, say for example, a copper coated steel wire. And so the speed of those polarity switchings, which you could say is like the speed of the pulse rate, directly relate to how an element is going to interact with that. So this is one thing that's going to be done in great detail when magnetic energy comes out, is the entire natural periodic table of the elements will be all carefully documented, carefully examined, and it will be redone according to magnetic pulse rates and magnetic, so it'll be magnetic field strength, magnetic pulse rates, magnetic intensity, and magnetic polarities, and the magnetic resonance polarities involved in those pulse rates. Because what happens is, as you document all of that, it gives you this ability to those molecules. As that neutral magnetic current moves into those molecules like they start to loosen their electromagnetic grip on each other, or their magnetic grip that we would say. So the vortices become less polarized and more neutral. And I'll get right into that. So what this will allow us to do in a pulsing, relatively neutral pulsing magnetic field, it gives you the ability to combine elements that you normally wouldn't combine, to greatly strengthen and enhance the performance of elements, because we can control the geometric structures of those elements. And then it also gives us the ability to really significantly modify those elements with tremendous precision. So we're talking about being able to cut, for example, elements down to the micron level and to the nano level and to the atomic level with exacting precision, because we're doing it in an environment where the magnetic hold between the elements has been greatly reduced. So that's a fantastic thing. And now when you get into this idea, so like chords always combine these different notes. So it's the same thing like in the magnetic field. When you start combining different pulse rates and combining different magnetic polarities, it gives you the ability to really go crazy with your creativity. So partly how that works out, let's talk about replicating. So when you are going to replicate let's just say you're going to replicate a magnetic device. Okay, so you're going to have two different chambers. You're going to have your magnetic device in one magnetically saturated chamber, where we raise the resonant vibration of that magnetic device so that the entire device is kind of in this state of flux. It's almost like blinking in and out of our reality. And so we greatly enhance the vibration, the sound vibration of those elements in that chamber. Okay, so then we let the signature, the magnetic resonance signature of all of that's in that chamber feed into another chamber that we have completely saturated and compressed. It's compressed neutral magnetic energy. So when you start off here, this would be like the polarized energy of the device, and then this would be the relatively neutral energy of the device, or of a typical element. So what we do is, this is almost like 3D printing from the subatomic level. So part of what happens is, in your creation chamber, it's really your formulation chamber, you have a 0G magnetic pulse in that chamber so that you can perfectly replicate that other device or whatever you're replicating with perfect accuracy down to the subatomic level. So you have a 0G environment that is highly compressed neutral magnetic energy. So then what happens is, you have the polarized signals coming in and you have a neutral environment. So as you slowly change that ratio, the neutral energy starts to starts to go up or down depending on what you're doing. Now, if we're formulating a new device, let me switch that. So it's going to be highly neutral in that chamber, and we have a low magnetic resonance of polarities in that chamber because we're feeding off of what we're copying. So then the neutral side is very high and the polarized side is very low if we're going to be replicating something. So then as those ratios change and that device starts to materialize out of that compressed neutral magnetic energy, the neutral energy goes down, 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 the polarization energy goes up, 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 all the way until the point where you have basically 3D printed from the subatomic level out of etheric magnetic energy your new device. Okay? Now, if you are looking at like something like garbage and you want to take the garbage away, like turn it back into etheric energy or neutral energy, then the process is exactly the opposite. So you would have a chamber full of garbage or an entire landfill surrounded by basically poles that would be emitting those magnetic fields, those magnetic energy, neutral, relatively neutral magnetic pulse rates. And we're going to start with a relatively low neutral thing, and now we're highly polarized, so we have like all the garbage in that chamber. And then we do the exact opposite. So we start to decrease the polarization of the energy and we increase the neutral part of that energy all the way to the point where everything in that chamber is almost completely neutral. And then at that point, it's essentially energy that's going back into the etheric flow, into the magnetic energy flow, and there's nothing there anymore. Now, the reason this doesn't require a tremendous amount of electricity or breaking bonds or a super collider or anything is because all of those bonds in that garbage, they want that neutral energy. They are attracted to that neutral magnetic energy. So they readily accept it. And as we train them, or as we keep infiltrating more and more of the neutral magnetic energy and the polarized energy, so they're polarized bonds, which are vortices that have resonant magnetic signatures in them, those all start to become more and more neutral. And then right before your very eyes, that garbage literally starts to dissipate and break down into neutral magnetic energy. And so that's those two things. It's like you're getting this ability to either replicate something or turn garbage into nothing. Now, the last part of this is as we document the elements, and there are many more elements that are not on our current natural periodic table of the elements, and so those will also become documented, and it will be to the point where you have neutral magnetic chambers that are drawing in energy, specific resonant polarities, and it will be through sound, it will be through vibration, it will be through magnetic pulsing, and you will have all of those elements being formed out of a highly compressed neutral magnetic energy chamber that begins as neutral, starts to take on an elemental signature, and then forms that element in that chamber in geometrical patterns and structures that are very powerful. So you can kind of get the idea of how important it is, natural vibrations and vibrations in the world and sound vibrations, blending those frequencies, blending those magnetic sound vibrations, and really how it can change our world and change our environment and change our water and give us anti-gravity devices and everything like that. So this is huge and it's highly important, and it's another aspect of the magnetic energy model that is so connected to vibration and sound. And ancient civilizations had this stuff down. I mean, they knew exactly what they were doing. That's why there's all these levitation stories and how they could build incredible objects that we couldn't necessarily even build today. They had it down. They knew what they were doing, and they were so in touch with the earth. And part of this whole process is us getting back to that, getting back to being in touch with that, and getting away from electromagnetic frequencies and electrical technology, because it really dampens this process tremendously. It inhibits and it blocks the natural magnetic resonant signatures and the natural magnetic resonant flow, the neutral magnetic flow. It really is kind of a bit of a battle. And so it's important for us to transition away from electrical technology and move into something that's much more natural and in line with the planet and sound and everything. So That was a lot of rambling, wasn't it? I apologize. But you know, it's important. I think this topic's important, and so I just thank you for your time, and I will see you next time.